Welcome from the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter. This is the study group for May 11th, 2023. Let me share my screen. Here we go. You have reached us here at the 77th class. This is the techniques class. We're going to go over workshops, focus groups, business rules analysis. And if we run out of those, we might go over something else. Today, I want you to know that our mission is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the BA community. We have a worldwide audience. A lot of people watch us by recording only. If you watch us by recording only, we would love to hear from you. We need to know that we are doing good in the world. This is our BABOK study group. We have it every Thursday night between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock Eastern time. You can reach our past meeting recordings here at this link. We'll drop that in the chat. We have a lot of different ways to reach us through the IIBA, through Meetup, Zoom, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And just as a bonus, Watermark Learning, one of our sponsors, has provided us a discount code. So if you'd like to purchase any of their products, they have the discount code Tampa 21. This gives you a 20% discount on any of their products, and they have more than just business analysis products. We are a volunteer-led organization. You see Cliff here in the Millennium Falcon. Lori, Caitlin, and Priscilla are also on our board. My name is Thea Soren. I'm the Vice President of Career and Professional Development for the chapter. It's my job to help you. If you need something, reach out to me on LinkedIn. The last name is spelled S-O-E-H-R-E-N, and I'm happy to do so. We need some additional board members. It doesn't matter where you live. You can be a board member for our chapter. So reach out to either Cliff or myself, and we'll see what you want to do, how long you want to provide your assistance, and we'll find a job that we need done and that you can do. One of the reasons that we are a study group is we have Bob here, who is one of our CBAP recipients. He's already passed his CBAP certification. He also has a website that he has a lot of really good stuff at. And here's his email if you have any questions for him. Bob, what's the latest stuff on your website lately?
I've been doing a series of webinars for another group, which gives a broad overview of business analysis, beginning from the practice of doing computer simulation in various forms, and then how that translates over into business analysis, which is ultimately the way I learned it. It doesn't necessarily follow what the BABOK says. It tells exactly the same story. It tells it a different and I think more understandable way. I always feel that I'm trying to teach you to be the best possible analyst. And if you get certified, that's great. I know you're here to, get credits for getting certified, and that is as it should be. It's just when I'm speaking to general audiences, it's not always the highest priority for me. But if you have any interest in these things, I've done 7 in the latest series. That's the link. Links to the slides and videos are all on that page down at the bottom. So feel free to dig into those or any other materials and ask me whatever questions you want. If you think they're great, tell everyone you know. If you think they suck, tell me and I'll make them better.
Right. Yulia also joins us periodically. She was a student of ours for a while, and then she's also passed her CBAP certification. She just celebrated her graduation with her master's degree. Tish, Bonnie, Frank, Renu, all also have passed their certifications. We look forward to hearing from more of you as you pass your certification, whatever it may be. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Bob today. He's going to talk about workshops, focus groups, and business rules analysis. If we run out of that, I'm going to pick it up with the next technique. If you have a technique that we haven't covered that you're interested in covering for us, let me know. I'll add you to the list. I just need to know when you want to cover it and approximately how long you want. The only thing we need from you is, what does the BABOK say? Because we want people to be able to pass their BABOK certification test. And if you have any experience with it yourself, show us some of that so that we can see how you use it in the real world. We want to hear what you've learned so that we can be better. So Bob, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, also, Jim did a great job talking about estimation last week. So definitely sign up for some of these, put some materials together and share them. I always learn from what other people have to say, and it's a great experience for all concerned.
Absolutely. You don't have to be an expert presenter. Just try. That's all we need. Try. Okay, Bob.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. There we go. So let's talk about focus groups and workshops. Can you see this?
We can see your screen.
All right, let me make it a little bigger. So there really isn't much to say. The page on glossary, about which I spoke maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, was really short. And I managed to find a lot of things to say about it. However, focus groups and workshops, both of them are equally short, and I could not think of a lot of things to say about it. However, what I will say, both are barely 2 pages long in BABOK. You can read each one in like 2 minutes, and they're mostly the same. So what they are is getting a group of people together to think about stuff or do stuff. And you can do it at any phase of the project, any engagement, and you can do them for any activity. A focus group, the main difference between them is that a focus group is generally about consumers reacting to a product, how it's positioned, how it is advertised, what features they want, how they're reacting to it, and so on. A workshop is a more general thing where you get together and you can do any kind of work in a workshop. One of the things that happens quite often is you will get together and brainstorm requirements. You might brainstorm solution ideas or designs. You might think about how to do root cause analysis. So you get people together, you establish an objective, a place, a time, procedures you're going to use. There are certain roles like a sponsor, a moderator, or facilitator, a note taker, any SMEs or other participants. And one of them mentions a timekeeper also. But all that is boilerplate. You know what these things are, and there's just not a whole lot to say about them. So these things allow you to gather or accomplish a lot in a short period of time, but they can be expensive. It can be somewhat difficult to get everybody together, but you have the benefit of enhanced communication because of face-to-face interaction. Now, you can do these things online, via Zoom or whatever, but they're generally best done in person. So, and that is the main thing I have to say about that. There's just not much to go on there. You're muted.
I am. I'm very brilliant whenever I'm muted. I just want y'all to know that. Can I add a few more bits to that, please?
Please do.
Whenever you run a workshop or a focus group, it's really important that you really plan out what you're going to be doing so that people arrive with a good understanding of what's going to be expected of them, what topics you're going to cover. And it's really also important that you monitor your audience. A lot of times this is something you're getting 6, 12 people together and you need them to communicate. I like to do workshops specifically whenever I think I've got about 80% of my requirements. And now it's time, I've gone to each individual group and gotten requirements, but now we're down to the fine tuning and we need to be sure that people hear what each other is doing and be sure there's no conflicts. We want to be sure that we get everything refined. And it's important that you put what the notes taking up on the board or something so everyone can see, okay, next thing we're going to do is this. If you got a process map, display the process map so everyone can validate it. If people bring up things that are not specific to the goal of the focus group, it's important that you put them on a parking lot, on a side tablet of who said it, what topic they want to cover, and how urgent it is. That way they know you're listening, and you validate that they talked and they will maybe not continue to talk about that topic and you can get back to the topic that you have. But it's really important that you drive the conversation to achieve the goals that you have. If you have to use time boxing, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about this. And at the end of 30 minutes, we're going to take a vote and come up with a decision, or, however you want to do it. But this is typically something that you really have to drive hard. You have to be in control. It's important that you have the ability to take a break periodically and let people know, in 2 hours, we're going to stop and have a 15-minute break. If you need to make phone calls, please save them for that time. Don't check your email, close your computers, do whatever you have to do to help keep them focused on getting the task at hand accomplished and keep their attention to it. If you see their attention wandering, have a way to bring it back. So this is you kind of being the maestro of their focus and being sure that you achieve the goal as you go through it. One of our challenges as BAs is we don't always understand the topic that we're talking about. We have to get a requirement on this thing that we don't, it's super technical and there's people in the room that understand it better than us. So what you have to do as you're creating your invitation is say, this is what the topic we're going to talk about. These are the details people need to know. This is what we need to, we need to know which vendor we're going to go with. We need to know which package we're going to choose. You need to have that piece of information. You really don't have to understand every single detail. The more you understand, the better. But we can only put so much in our brains. And if we could put it all in our brains, we wouldn't need all these other people. But we do need all these other people. So be gracious to yourself that you can't do it all. Do the best you can to keep everybody focused. Use a little bit of humor if you need to. I've seen people tell vice presidents, if they continue to disrupt or continue to distract, tell them to leave the room because the rest of us have work to do. And the vice president will sometimes, I've seen it twice happen. And both times that person came back and they said, that's never happened to me. And I fully understand exactly what happened. I'd like to come back after lunch if that's okay. they want to be part of it, but they just didn't realize that their behavior was being so disruptive. But it's your job to ramrod it and get to the goals of the meeting. I also understand whenever you get people together, it's expensive. Not only are they maybe traveling or, spending time in a different place so that they can all be in a room together, you've got people that are not necessarily the lowest paid people in the company sitting there for multiple hours together. So it multiplies their pay by that much time. Let them know that this is their chance to, at lunch, they'll have a chance to network and things like that. Give them benefits that you think would be important to them. But achieving the goal of the meeting is really the most important thing. That's all I have to say.
And I want to say two things following up on that. And Thea used the word, these things are meetings. So everything you would say about meetings in general always applies. One of the things you don't want to do is use 8 high-paid people and spend $2,000 making a $1,000 decision. So make sure the meeting makes sense and pays for itself. And other than that, read the BABOK. Like I said, it'll take all of 2 minutes for these 2 subjects, and off we go. Anybody
Absolutely.
else before we close that one out? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on. So let's talk about business rules analysis. So what are business rules? They are procedures and decisions and parameters and regulations that govern business operations. The business always has control of them. And this is true even when you're following rules imposed by other vendors, contracts, regulations, government stuff, other situations. You are responding to that need or that requirement as an organization. You decide how to express and define the rule, and you decide how your organization is going to implement and adhere to and judge it. So business rules analysis defines rules, validates them, organizes them, maintains them, updates them, implements them, uses them, responds to them, and so on. So we know that requirements in like user stories have to be kind of atomic. They have to be understandable. They have to be succinct. They have to use language that is understood terms of art, either in general or in that business or industry. So all that has to be taken into account. So I linked to it the discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about the glossary to talk about terms of art. So the rules should be expressed separately from how they're enforced. For example, you might say, okay, people buy things, and if it's a B2B transaction, they have 60 days to pay. So you might set up rules saying that, okay, we're going to take the order, we're gonna create an owner record someplace, an order record someplace. We're gonna make certain things happen in the warehouse, get stuff to shipping, bail it out, and then we're gonna put something in a queue saying, hey, this is stuff we're waiting to get paid for. And then if it isn't paid within 30 days, we'll send out a note. And if it isn't paid within 60 days, we'll send out a nastier note. And if it's not, and we'll maybe stop them from buying more stuff. And if it isn't paid in 90 days, we'll refer them to a collection. So those are all rules, and there are parameters, and there are procedures that govern all those things. And you want to express.
Your login attempt has failed. Make sure the username
Sorry.
and password are correct. Log in.
Okay. You want to make sure those things are expressed separately from how you're going to implement the procedures, how you're going to track what's how old, where things go, or and so on. So there are, you want to keep everything separate as much as possible. So in order to really discuss this, what I did is I made a visual aid. So I will try to make this even bigger. So imagine we have this little system here, which is a very tiny part of our business. One more time, maybe. Yeah. So we have a bunch of different things that come into our organization. They can be orders, they can be physical good, parts, components, supplies, people, or whatever, right? And they're going to come in, and they have a list of attributes, and they have a list of actions associated with each one. Now, you know, if you know anything about object-oriented programming or class definitions or and so on, is you're defining things by qualities and actions that are associated with them. And this was a big breakthrough in programming about 30 years ago when people came up with it. Actually about 35 now. I'm feeling kind of old. But this is what you how you describe things. So let's say you come have these things come into your organization, into some kind of process you've implemented. And I made sure to make this very abstract. So there are a lot of things that can happen to all these things that come in. And sometimes things will come in, you'll do the same thing to everything. Like you might classify and index it and record it, and then you'll route it to something based on some characteristic. So let's say that first type sorter we have right there will be, okay, let's say we're using this fourth attribute to say, okay, it's one of this, those, or the other, and we're going to send it to a different process. So you can imagine, based on your business, anything that could be orders could be one thing, money could be another different kind of payments. People can come in, customers, employees. I worked in so many different kinds of businesses. They had tons of different things they processed. So you can imagine, like process A, you'll ship some of the arrivals off to process A. You'll do something and send them on their way. Now you're done. Process B, which may or may not be spun by process A, or maybe it'll just be its own thing. Once you do the initial process, maybe you'll ship them off to a queue or a storage someplace. And then you'll have multiple different sub-processes that say they all run once a day. So, and they're all governed by some kind of parameter. And if the situation in sub-process B1 comes up with a positive result, it'll send that thing out of the queue and out of the system. And if sub-process 2 might parse the whole list, say it does this every day or every 2 days, it may take some other action, like I'll send a message out. So I won't change the thing that's in storage, say the record or whatever. I'll just send a message out to make things, different things happen. And there might be a third sub-process that goes through and calculates statistics or ages all the things in there by 1 or X number of days or so on. And then if you have a third process, you might do a series of tests on it and send them off to different exits, and they may exit to other internal processes or out of the organization entirely. So ideally, you follow that, and you can see that business rules embody the decisions made, the actions taken, or the shape of your process, and also parameters that govern what's going on. So does that make sense to you? And it should be pretty straightforward. I'm sure you can all think of zillions of examples from your own work of how this is done. One thing I did is I wrote a little bit of code here just to give you an example of how that might be implemented. It can be very simple. It's just of the upper right-hand parts of this business here. So sub-process 3 goes through once a day and ages all these things by 1 day, maybe 2 or some parameter. This one says, okay, once that everything is aged, if they're equal in age to the parameter I've defined, which is changeable independently, I can make it 30 days, I can make it 60, I can do different things based on amounts owed. Any parameter or control kind of variable you can imagine, I will compare it to that, and maybe I'll take some action, and I'll also parse and say, okay, anything that's either been paid or aged out or shipped off to someplace else entirely. So I wrote some really basic JavaScript to do that. If you want to look at that on your own, have at it. I just included in, not to say that's what things are, but just to give you a rough abstract idea of how things can be implemented. So like I said, you state the rule, and the way you implement it and follow it is very, very different. So the BABOK says a few things about the way these things should work. So you should base them on standard business vocabulary to enable domain subject matter experts to understand and validate them. So far, so good, right? You can express them separately from how they'll be enforced. You should define them at an atomic level. They always talk about writing requirements. That way they should be standalone and not have a lot of cross involvement. And they should be separate from the process they support or constrain. You should map them to decisions the rule supports or constrains, and they should be maintained in such a manner or in a manner such that they can be monitored and adapted as business circumstances change. And that is really most of what I have to say on that. Hopefully, and that makes sense. The BABOK goes into a little more verbiage about definitional rules and behavioral rules, and talks about strengths and limitations. I will invite you always to read the BABOK on these subjects, but that's most of what I have to say. Any questions or comments?
I think this is an excellent explanation, and I love your graph there, Bob. One of the things that I'm struggling with on my current project and have struggled with on past projects is like eliciting these sort of rules, especially when you're taking a legacy system and you have to kind of translate what it does to what the new system is going to do. Those rules kind of live in the background, and many users have come and gone and may not even realize those rules exist. And so, but there have been some lessons along the way. I had been stating my business rules in kind of an if then else format. But when we got to the point of making them testable and putting them in testing statements, our testing analysts coached me in making them a when then. So when this condition is true, then this will happen. That way it makes it more atomic. It's not saying if then else do this, else do that, else this. And so that's been kind of a challenge, but a good one, because it's made me think atomically on the business rules. So when a harm score is 8 or 9, executive management will be notified immediately by this method. And so, but what's been your experience in terms of just trying to elicit these very, very necessary and often complex rules from, say, large groups of stakeholders that they know the system and they know the business knowledge, but kind of getting them to provide the information? Is there a secret?
I have just, I'm sometimes not always the best person to talk to about things like this, and here's why. I started off as an engineer and a programmer, right? So I always had the tools to translate what they were thinking and what they needed into the appropriate code, almost at the DNA level without having to think about it. So one of the great things that you just differentiated between was an if when and also an if then. So let me talk to you about how this, I made these sections of the diagram reflect that very dichotomy, right? So I was aware of what you're trying to get at. So for things that go to process A, you do something basic, go to exit A, you're done. Piece of cake, right? So process B goes to a storage, and you do these things and they age over time. So that is a form of if when. And there are a lot of rules that can govern that. And there is an if, but there is also an age. Now, if you look at process C, it might say, okay, if something is green or lorem ipsum equals A, B, or C, do this. And if a lorem ipsum is C, D, or E, do that and do it right away. And if it's G through Z, do it this way, and if it's not that, send it to storage. So there are things that could be if then based on things you know right now. And it can also be based on if when. I know from doing discrete event simulation and even continuous simulation that both of those rules come into play, and it's a fairly standard thing that happens in computer science, as I'm sure Cliff will tell you ad nauseum.
Oh, not ad nauseum.
You're bringing back memories with the if then else, or yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the else. If then else can get really ugly, like you said, Jim, because you can end up with an else of an else of an else of an else. And by the time you get to the fifth else, it's like, what the hell was I testing for? Because you lose track.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I love to make diagrams. A picture is worth 1,000 words. It's a great way to build mutual understanding in a language everyone can kind of inherently get.
Jim, I would always encourage you to use a given at the beginning of your statement, given, when, then, because that way you can set up the scenario for people that are not familiar with it, and it can be even more autonomous.
Oh, I like that idea.
You want to define terms, so I have examples of equations. So I'll write the equation out and I'll go where, and then I'll say what all the variables are, what the units are, and the decisions will be fairly straightforward. So, like I said, I can extend that JavaScript to talk about process C, the directed then else is. But yeah, I think we discussed what we really need to cover.
Jim, I'd also encourage you to go talk to your help desk folks and your QA folks. Ask the help desk folks what issues have been reported and what did they think was supposed to happen and why. And you can get the names of the people. Then go talk to QA and say what should happen when and why. And they'll be able to tell you what the business rules are that are built into the system.
and talk to your coders and see how they've implemented things.
Well, it sounds like this was implemented so far back, those people aren't around anymore.
Actually, that's a good idea, and I think that's what, it's one of the things I'm pointing to on our project right now is these coders actually know very well how the system works, but they're under such pressure that they're not writing any of it down. They're just coding it into the new system. And so as the business analyst and also working with our testing analyst, we're going, well, if you don't write your requirements down and your designs down as you do this, we won't know what to test. So that's kind of more like how we influence people to give us the information, kind of help them understand why we need that information.
Right? Your
Yeah.
last prong is going to be doing actual testing. Let's do this and see what the system does, and then tell me why it's doing that. Because
Right.
that's your final fill in the blanks. But a decision tree is a really great way to do that.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways you can write down decisions and thought processes. So last cycle, when we went through all the techniques, I'm pretty sure I did a blog post on the decision analysis technique. So that's in my blog someplace. There are a lot of ways to do this, as I keep saying, and one of the things you want to do, I have so many comments. One, if you don't have time to do it right, why is it you always find time to do it over? If your managers aren't giving people time to do it right and actually document everything, then they're just making work for themselves in the long run. I can't remember what else I was gonna say, but it'll come to me, I'm sure.
One last comment about business rules. If you don't think you have business rules in your life, tell me how you get time off. Tell me how you get insurance. Tell me how you know who to report to and how you get a paycheck. You got business rules. That's what those are. How do you turn in your time card? How do you, whatever. Those are business rules.
I know when we used to do simulate, I remember one thing. Whenever you're implementing any rule or solution, all the decisions or all the outcomes, you want to think about how you're going to test them ahead of time. So there's a standard for knowing what is success and what is failure, and you want to generally make that as binary as possible. Anytime you're doing verification, that's more subject to automation, and it's more subject to yes, no answers. There are certain aspects of validation that say, does this solve the right problem? Does it look right? Does it meet the business need? Those can be a little more nebulous, but you always want to go into something defining what success and failure is going to be, and with an eye toward testing it ahead of time. You don't just create something and fling it over the transom and then go, hey, test this. Everybody should be working together from the beginning. Now, I know, and you know, and everybody else knows that that doesn't often happen in the real world, but it's what should.
Very good. Any questions about business rules or comments?
Honestly, you could talk about this for another week, easy.
It's
I
true.
could give you I can give you so many examples of one of the things that you said, Jim, too, is going from an old system to a new system. On a lot of projects, we get so bent up on solving the 100% rather than 90%, and focus so much time on the exceptions to the exceptions to the exceptions. The one time something happens out of a million transactions, and they'll focus on that one little stupid little thing, and it's like, it's we have a lot of problems with this, focusing in some projects on just every possible scenario that could come in, rather than focus on the main thing, the 90%, rather than those exceptions to the exceptions.
Right.
There are also definitions of done, right, for requirements. They are a kind of built-in business rule in your engagement process. So all these concepts stack up and on top of each other and cross-reference each other.
If you want to know more about business rules, check out Bob's blog, or there is a business rules group or a couple of business rules groups on LinkedIn. They are very enthusiastic about what business rules are. And I always, y'all know exactly who I'm talking about. I always enjoy hearing about it, but honestly, I've got a lot more in my world than just business rules. And that seems to be what they have in their world, but you can learn from them. So dip your toe in that periodically. Bob, do we have enough time to go through your next one?
Well, I don't have another one ready, but there is something I would like to discuss that should take up the rest of our session. So one of the things we were talking about for the initial BABOK techniques we've covered is whether they are most applicable to a let me stop sharing. Whether they're most applicable to the engagement, which is the work of doing business analysis, or whether they're most applicable to the solution or the creation of a solution, or whether they are equally applicable. So I know I wanted to start talking about this because the way you all discussed something gave me a wider understanding of its applicability, and I thought that was interesting. So I made up a table about and a long blog post about which it's appropriate to, and so far we have metrics and KPIs, and we decided that was primarily about the engagement. We said that was mostly about the solution more than the engagement. Interviews are more about the engagement than the solution. Prioritization is more about the engagement. Backlog management is totally about the engagement, right? Almost. Stakeholder list maps and personas is mostly about the engagement, but can also be about the solution, because you're governing how it can be used. And matter of fact, maybe that should be both. And then rules and permission matrix, that can be both. The stakeholder list map and personas is totally about the engagement. So it's about who you're working with to solve the problem, right? So the next one we talked about a little while ago is the glossary. So do we think, what do you think, solution or engagement?
I think it's solution. No. I think it's engagement, because it's how you use this term as you're building your solution. I don't know. What do you think?
I was gonna vote for solution because the glossary defines everything that you're talking about, which contributes to things like business rules and other events or processes. It defines them so that people can understand the current state or the future state of the solution. So I can see it from both directions. I think the creation of the glossary is more about engagement, but I think the glossary itself, when it's finished, speaks directly to the components of the solution.
I agree. I like the way you
would like
argue.
to say therefore it's both equally. How about that?
Any other opinions?
Don't be bashful, people. We don't bite.
I do have a question, and it's something I keep contemplating. I haven't really hit bottom on this yet, Bob. I love your distinction between solution-oriented things and what was the other side?
Engagement.
Engagement.
People say it's the product versus the process. Is
That makes sense.
another way they say that.
I'm just wondering if there are some other perhaps refinements, that aspects, lenses we could look at techniques through, so that I can remember when to apply them in the BABOK processes. I started to do that on my study worksheet that I showed before, and I started asking questions, and I may noodle on that some more to say, if I had, say, 5 or 6 different sort of qualities of a technique, what would those be? And then which techniques would fall into each of those qualities? Because if I could understand that, then I can map, say, those 5 or 6 concepts to the various processes in the BABOK in an easier way. So I could understand, like, a group of techniques that are focused on strategy, for instance. So, okay, which techniques are most strategic? That might be an example. And which techniques are most, I don't know, maybe they map to the six concepts.
Well,
Need.
they actually map to every one of the 6 knowledge areas has like 3 to 6 different sub processes within that.
Yeah.
And there was a table in the back of the BABOK someplace that maps all the techniques to each one of those sub blocks. And I created a spreadsheet that maps those that should be on the shared drive for the group. So if you can find that, if not, let me know, I'll find it. And when I created that, right as I was taking my exam, and this was 6 years or so ago at this point, I actually found a couple, 2 or 3 places where the BABOK was inconsistent. So I sent those to the IIBA, and they're now listed as errata. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, because I have a mapping of my 6 phases, of what you do through the life cycle of a project, I could apply them to those. And they are very similar and follow the same trajectory as the BABOK does. you're really talking about the same things. I think the order makes more sense to me. It may not to anybody else, but I teach it like it does, or I share it like it does. And that may be a useful mapping also. Mostly if you understand the techniques and what you're trying to accomplish, it should be pretty obvious what you're supposed to be doing when. And I know that may not be super helpful, but it's really, I don't know what else to say. That's just how I do it. And like I say, I may not be the best person to say all the time.
You give us a lot of value, Bob.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I think I'm a why thinker. I think many of us are. It's so much easier when you understand why a technique is used, and what it does and what it's like, what it creates. Then you can apply it anywhere in any situation and say, oh, this really would work here or it doesn't. So it seems like it behooves us to really understand the techniques themselves, rather than trying to memorize which techniques are used in which process. If we understand the technique and we qualitatively understand the goal of each process, we can then ascertain why that technique would be useful in a situation.
It's
And
like
remember, all of our histories and experience are necessarily different, right? And I haven't used all 50 of these techniques, and I've read some of those and learned about them and say, when in God's name would I ever use that? But somebody else could come along and say, I use that all the time. I live and die by that. And that's the way it should be. That is real diversity. And if we, with all our different points of view, can work together iteratively with good communication, then you know, we get the best possible outcomes. Nobody's going to know it all themselves. That's why you don't need a score of 100 to pass the exam. If you get 70%, you know it well enough to be turned loose in the wild and create value.
I do, speaking of things I live and die by, item tracker, I'll take that subject and I'll show you a working item tracker.
Fantastic.
Give me a couple weeks and I'll do a presentation on item tracking if somebody hasn't already signed up for that one.
I'll put you on the list. And if anyone has any other things that they were interested in presenting, we have quite a list left to go. Let's see, Jim has item tracking. Item tracking. Bob, did you do item tracking?
I was claiming it, but if anyone else wants to do it themselves, it's your class, not mine. Have at it.
Okay, Jim, you just let me know what date you want to do that.
I'll get some other things ready.
Right.
So that's about all the time we have. We'll try to get caught up on these discussions. I really enjoyed learning from you all.
Y'all's participation makes a big difference. Whenever I get communications from people that they live 7 hours off of our time zone and they can't attend and they only attend through the recordings, they talk about the conversations. They talk about us by name. I mean, one guy said, I was so excited when Yulia passed her exam. He's never met you. He's never been in a class with her, but they're bonding with y'all, but they need to hear your voices. So the more that y'all speak up and communicate during these classes, the more you not only help us, you help everyone that's going to come after us that use these as their recordings. Okay, guys, we will see you next week. I don't have a list of exactly what we're going to be covering on the techniques, but hopefully I'll get it to Cliff before he posts his announcement so he can post it Otherwise, we'll be here for the next techniques next week. Okay. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Have a good week. Be safe.
All right, guys, see you next week.